hopefully it will go. Huh?
So that will be a new experience for you. I can see that it has
Yeah.
started recording.
I mean, for your sake, I hope the recording will be okay. I have no idea where it's saved, what format.
I have tested those features multiple times already, so I'm quite confident that everything will be okay.
Okay.
The weather is quite cold right there, and I have lost your picture.
I'm still seeing it as a picture-in-picture. Looks okay for me.
You should see me.
Yeah, I'm seeing you.
See you.
I don't know.
Try
the video
and turning off the camera on Skype.
Okay, let me turn it off and restart it. Maybe it works. Yeah.
Just press the camera button and it will disable it and enable it again. That should do. Here we go.
Okay, good.
Yes. So yeah, the weather is quite cold right now, and what is happening with my setup at this point is I got the light on the ground, and my tripod is a little bit funny because it's sliding all over the place. So I will find, hopefully at some point I will find a spot which will not change. Maybe I got it. No, let's see. But yeah, there might be a few hiccups.
Yeah, no worries.
So here we go. All right. So hi, Bogdan.
Hello again, Yuri. What are you up to?
Well, at this point, just talking to you. That's the whole idea of our conversation here. And since we have met quite randomly on a social platform, which I want to keep a secret of for now, because I wanted to be have some sort of breathing space at this point, because the way I felt about this platform was I found it being quite unique in terms of the culture, which is which people are sort of carrying in on that platform.
Exactly, I know what you mean.
So, if you know what I mean, could you please explain it in your words? How would you define?
How would I define the platform?
Why do you think I find it so being so special?
Well, first of all, and I'm not going to give any names here, it relies a lot on numerology and things like that, which is an area that only some people explore at some point. And to be honest with you and tell you my bit of history here, I actually got to find out accidentally about this platform. It was recommended to me by a girl I've met on a trip, and I'm all for exploring, you know. So because if you would start only based on what you already know or what is already consecrated or well known already, you're not going to discover anything new. And there might be a chance that by ignoring these other philosophies or other beliefs, you might actually be missing something important, because I'm 200% sure that not everything that matters is gathered, let's say, in what we would call the Western culture. There could be, I don't know, maybe a tribe in Amazon that has discovered something really essential, but if you are not willing to listen to them and to experience what they would have to say, you'll never find out about it. So basically, this is what pushed me to explore the app when I first found out about it. I mean, I'm not, let's say, an actual believer in numerology, but I say, okay, if some people believe in it, there might be something. Let's give it a shot. Let's see what what's it about. There was more about it, not only this app, but I was curious, you know.
Right.
And the next thing I found out after I got in there was that okay, the projections, much like a horoscope, if you want, were quite interesting. Only that the time span was different, and because of that, I guess the people that were gathered in there, first of all, what I noticed as a sort of common ground, they went through all sort of experiences in their lives. I mean, they had a more profound approach to things, a different way of seeing life now because of their experiences. And honestly, I haven't encountered those sort of interactions on other platforms, on other social platforms. So even if in the end I said, okay, I've explored it, I don't believe in this numerology stuff, but somehow I didn't want to quit the platform because I said there are some interesting people gathering in here, a lot of insight to find out. I mean, I've seen also other blogs from other people, podcasts, things you wouldn't find out about because they're not world famous. But
Right.
even like your project, you know,
Yeah.
I would just Google it and find out about it. So it's this sort of interactions and things you can learn about that made me stick to the platform and what I found interesting about it.
Okay. Okay. Um, just to let you know that I'm being I'm having a company here with of three guys whom I don't know, and it's um, late at night. You can expect a lot of things to happen.
Okay.
I will stay quite safe. If anything, I constantly run some not algorithms, but how would you call it? Um,
All I can do for you at this moment is record it as evidence. That's all I
so
can
this is great.
afford.
So this is great. Yes, and I know what to do in different scenarios. But just letting you know that if anything,
Yeah,
um,
no
you will
worries.
be my witness here. Right,
Damn,
but
that
but
would be a plot twist, you know.
yeah, that would be a plot twist, quite a plot twist. Um, anyway, however, let's get back to our conversation. You know, let's try to define it in a better way,
Mhm,
because I have a same sort of perspective on that platform. I noticed that it was based on some either numerology or horoscopes, and that is very alien to me. But regardless of that, I found that those descriptions or those texts or questions that the app that this app provides um, define. I found that they define quite sensitive nature
mhm,
of our, of us
mhm.
human beings.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized that a lot of people are getting a lot of at least an at least an alternative narrative. Let's put it this way,
Mhm, mhm.
um, to reassess themselves, right? Because it doesn't force anything on you. It does not try to predict your future or anything
Correct.
like this. It's rather a psychological and insightful approach to our experience, right? And you are probably familiar with Jordan Peterson, aren't
Yeah,
you?
I know him. Yeah.
So you know that you probably are familiar with his development of those five um, traits um, or areas where which define our character, like the conscientiousness or and stuff like this, Mm. and um, and he claims, and I have no solid reason to not trust him, that this is one of the most solid psychological assessments you could have to identify your character and what kind of inclinations or tendencies you might have towards the life. So comparing that platform and his psychological researches, I think those are two completely different approaches. So just that I can imagine, I can predict that there could be some criticism directed towards the platform, right? That's why I'm kind of leaving some breathing space for that community, because, well, like I said, I found that those narratives which the app provide, they aren't aggressive, and they are rather tender and soothing, I would say, for many of us there. Of course, there are some people, and I think you've seen them too, who would have a laugh about some certain things which they when they don't match or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the general emotion, the general culture which you can feel there is calm.
Yeah,
right?
and I would say also supportive from what I've seen, people
And
supporting each other.
this is exactly how we have met each other there.
True, true.
Right. So if we would try to define it in the terms which would be understandable for scientific people, for those who are rational and who loves clarity, how would you be able to define that platform and that community in that regard, in that perspective?
Well, I guess you defined well the platform. It provides different perspective, which forces you to introspection. Now, depending on your experience and how much introspection you were forced to do in your life, because it's not something we choose to do when everything is going great. Usually, when darker times come, we start to introspect and think about our behavior and what happened and what drove us there and so on. And the platform, by the questions is asking, even those daily challenges, daily questions that you can find in there, it's rather like a form of coaching. I would compare it to coaching. It's
Right.
the term most at hand, and it's the same mechanism. It makes you think about certain things, and obviously when you go into those questions, you don't only read the questions and provide your answer there. You are also reading about other people's experiences, and maybe the most interesting part in there is that you see people from all over the world, different continents, with strikingly similar experiences described in there. Sometimes, of course, you can't match with everyone in there, but that tells you something about human nature and some repetitive behaviors or repetitive patterns that can occur based on personal history, because that's what drives us through our life. And in terms of the people, I've already told you, I think you need to be at a certain emotional level or exploring personal development of some sort, or being interested a bit more than the purely physical world and what you can see at hand. You need to be in a state of mind where you want to explore more about yourself, about the way your brain works, about your state of mind. So you need to have done some sort of introspection, or at least that's what I've seen in most of the people that are present there and interacting on the platform. I mean, of course, you can encounter a lot of jokes and superficial answers because nobody's always in the mood for going deep into those questions. It's normal. We go crazy if we do that.
True. I think this kind of description, we can give this description a green light. And there will be some probably red light at some point if we will touch some points of our conversation, which will be a bit sensitive, I guess.
Okay.
So this is that little bit of entertainment which I can allow myself to have having a conversation with you right now. So
Okay.
yeah, you have seen my Facebook page, and I assume because you went um, much further than anybody else, um, when you have read my how would I call that? When you have read my text, which I have written when I was crying out for help.
Yeah, it
No.
made me curious, and I mean, it was described as a creative effort in there, and I'm generally into that. I mean, I like to see original creations, let's call it like that. Whether it's, I know, a movie, a painting, a sculpture, whatever it is, something that came from someone out of that person's hands, using that person's imagination and so on. It's worth seeing it.
Mm. Well, this is very sweet to me, and I have actually embraced reaching out to some people on that platform. They like judging their responses to the insights or the doubts of other people there. So you were one of those whom have engaged with others in the most meaningful way. I haven't seen your. I have seen none of your responses written in some sort of generic way. When you would just congratulate someone without
Mhm.
any sense of personality in their story or their messages. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that you were one of the most responsive people who actually reach out to me. So that's probably a compliment which I can give you,
Thank you.
because you know uh, when you behave, when you act on your intentions and with such a strength, which is so visible and recognizable, that you identify the character quite well. Um, I think that speaks about some personality traits um, which you have developed in quite in a lot of unique ways, I would guess, haven't you?
Yeah, well, guess we can call it generically emotional intelligence. And to be
Right.
honest with you, I didn't always have this. I mean, there was a point where up to which I could say I was completely disconnected emotionally. I mean, I couldn't, let's say, get a glimpse of the other person's perspective or feelings in an interaction. I was at that at that point years ago. But of
Right.
course, things happened. I have evolved. I mean, I always had a keen interest in psychology, in applied psychology, of course. Also, try to take it further. But most of all, in the past few years, I've placed an emphasis on particularly this thing, on trying to understand how the other person is feeling and where that person is at that moment, because of course nobody likes to be put in a generic bucket or be dismissed when expressing a certain state of mind or personal feelings or experience, because and anyway, you can't compare experiences. I mean, even if the experience would be completely identical in the exact same situation with the exact same context and so on, the level at which a certain emotion is being perceived by the human in there will always be unique. And
Mm.
that is the part I mean, not you in particular, but that is the part everyone needs to understand. So yeah, when I'm interacting with other people on that platform, uh, first of all, I don't respond to everyone. I wouldn't have the time to respond to everyone. But when I'm engaging in a conversation there, it means no. It's either I know a familiar state or a familiar situation, or I can see exactly to what that person is going through at that moment, and I also know what they need to hear, and maybe they don't. And it's important the way we interact. I mean, on all social platforms, not just this, because some people might be reaching out on that platform, perhaps the only place where they are reaching out to other people, and it matters a lot how you respond in there.
Mm.
And even if they would receive, let's say, I don't know, maybe critics to a certain situation, or let's say 10 bad answers, that one good answer that they hear might make uh, a whole lot of difference to them, might mean the world.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm trying to support others there, depending on what I see, because I know that deep down, a lot of people are fighting battles relating to, I don't know, a family context, or poor self-esteem, or all sorts of other issues which are actually quite common worldwide. And sometimes I see them struggling, not understanding exactly where they are, and sometimes I'm throwing them a glimpse of what's really underneath.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I could take the time to explain the whole mechanism, but if that person is not ready or is not at that point, that person would not understand. But
Don't you get exhausted? I'm sorry, don't you get exhausted uh, engaging in conversations in such a deep way?
no, because first of all, it's not consuming that much time. As I've said, I'm picking just particular statements in there to answer every now and then. I don't do it all the time. And personally, usually when you interact with people experiencing some difficult times or some sort of trauma, you can be in one of these three positions, like the savior, the victim, or the aggressor. In our case, he would be the savior, but I've given up trying to be that for other people, because that's not what I'm trying to be. It would consume a lot of my own energy and time. And if people want to save themselves, I can show them a direction. I can give them a tool. I'm doing that with a lot of other people, also in my personal, private life, in day-to-day life. But you can't force somebody to save him or herself from a
Mhm.
certain place. But you can point out to a light. You can say a good word at some difficult moment. You can offer some tools, some direction. But the person needs to find the power to rise from there, because otherwise it will just create dependency.
And how often do you use your sense of humor doing that?
Well, I use my sense of humor on a daily basis, but it's I mean, that platform is a more sensitive area. I mean, in day-to-day life, or depending on how well I know the people I'm interacting with, I can be ironic, I can be sarcastic, or I can make a joke because they would understand. But when you're not
So
that close,
is it like the sensitive we shouldn't touch, or is it like just personal something like that?
well, I mean, depending
Could
on
you
on the
could you tell me without getting into detail? Could you tell me what kind of sense of humor do you prefer personally?
oh, I'm a fan of dark humor.
You are
I
a fan
like
of
it
that
a lot.
dark humor. I
Yeah,
see.
yeah. And I also don't. I mean, I don't take things personal when I hear jokes, or I'm joking with someone. So I can take a good joke. I mean, you know that nowadays especially if we're talking in an open space, let's say. And you could consider even this video we're doing now an open space. Um, there would be a lot of restrictions on the words you could use, the statements you can make in order not to hurt anyone's feelings. Try to stick objective and so on. And I understand all that. I mean, it's okay for something that's open to a general audience. That's fine. But on the other hand, in my personal interactions, when I know that a joke would not be targeted at someone in particular, it's just humor. I'm
Mhm.
fine with it.
Right. So if if I would add one additional point to what you just said, um, if I would say that probably a well-cultured person wouldn't have the issue with being in a public space because the basics and because the base of the knowledge or a character that one could build um, would be enough, and the additional elements where we explore some extra stuff, that would be probably the things where we deviate from some norms and which might get sensitive, which might insult someone, or maybe cause some personal discomfort for the one who is opening up on them or something. Would that be something relevant to the things which you have addressed?
Well, jokes can become harmful when they are relying on stereotypes, and they can lead to a behavior that's called mobbing, like putting someone in a corner. I mean, you can easily throw a joke in an open space, let's say on a social platform or something like that, and a lot of other people would pick up the joke and throw it further, especially if it's targeted at someone, and that's mobbing. That's like putting someone in the corner and punching
Mm,
that person. So
mm,
that wouldn't be okay. But on the other hand, uh, although being mindful of all these things, we need to accept that okay, mankind has a history. Every culture has a history, a context. Every culture is well known for one thing or for another, good and bad things alike. And humor is just humor. We don't need to take it personally as long as it's not discriminating, sorry, or targeted at someone in order to make that person feel small. That's bad. But as long as it's just humor, just making a joke, I don't think we need to be that sensitive every time.
fair point. Fair point. So I have seen that you um, are you developing a blog, or is it your personal website? Um, the articles which you
Mhm.
regularly post on your Facebook profile, are they do you publish them for someone else or for yourself?
No, they are on my personal website. They are expressing everything that I've experienced and learned. I mean, those are targeted rather for organizations and employees, but with a human touch, because the whole idea behind my website is that although we are doing our jobs or working for corporations or working in teams or in any sort of company, let's say as employees, there is still a human side in there which need to be seen, and that's the basis for all interactions that happen in there, the human side of our interactions, and that is what the website is emphasizing. Now, also that website has its own journey. I'm not sure where in which direction it will go, but it has modified a bit in time. It's still a young website, has about I think 1 year and a month right now, and it's still
Okay.
going to evolve because I'm working at it with a steady pace every week. And the best part of that is that I'm not forced in any way, neither in the content that I'm publishing nor in the cadence of publishing. That's just my own, let's say, self-discipline, if you will. But for me, it allows for a lot of freedom to express myself and also to explain things for others. And also maybe, I don't know, maybe somebody will read some content in there and will make a positive change in his or her life, or maybe in the way things are being run at certain
So
office.
I have read some content there,
Okay, thank you.
and and I have I came across an article where you have presented where you have presented 3 lessons which you have learned being a manager, I think,
Yeah,
junior
yeah,
manager, right?
yeah,
So could you tell me a little bit about that?
yeah. So first, the idea behind that article was to make it visible and understandable to anyone that even if you're on your way to becoming a manager or ascending to a certain role, maybe not a manager, it could be anything else, could be, I don't know, a researcher, whatever. First of all, you are going to make mistakes, and that's natural. And it's a natural path towards learning because a failure is basically a way in which you don't have to do things or in which you shouldn't do things. So it's still learning. And I'm always in favor of failing fast so that you can learn fast.
Mm-hmm.
And what's typical to managers, especially in corporations, is that most of them don't admit the fact that they've made mistakes. And I think we should express that more. And somehow that also shows the human part, because especially if you're in a bigger corporation or have a lot of people reporting to you, it might seem like you just went in a straight way there and you have the answers and you know what to do. But the fact is, we don't have all the answers. You learn a lot on the way there. I mean, you learn from that experiences, but you never have all the answers. But you know that it is expected from you to provide decisions and to act because that's why you are assigned there. But that's what I wanted to make visible most of all, that we all made mistakes, and it was the easiest to take my own example, make it like confession, This is what I went through. It took time and it had an impact. Every mistake that I did, I was able to recover them, but it happens. That's the way you learn. It's going to happen to everyone. Get rid of the imposter syndrome or whatever doubts you're facing, because there is no other way. Even if you try to run a bike, it's the same thing. You're gonna fall. You want to skip. First, you're gonna fall. That's reality. You're trying to do a job for the first time. Okay, maybe not in the first day, but you're going to fail eventually at something, and it's okay. It's natural.
This is why I am at the playground here,
Okay.
symbolically, just to add some symbols to the conversation that we are having. But that will be a bit relevant. That will be relevant a little bit later.
Okay.
So right. So now I have a little bit of background of yourself. So I will pass the ball to you, and you can get get an idea about my background. Shoot the questions.
Okay. Tell me what drove you to start this project, and if you have any direction. Although I got a glimpse of the fact that you are exploring, you have this uncertainty, you don't know where it will lead exactly, but something must have driven you in this direction. So, what's the story behind it?
Well, it's quite complex and a bit tragic. I guess every explorer at some point explores the new territories because the one they've been to didn't satisfy enough. Let's put it this way, right? to be more specific, I think the last drop, which have how does it sound? There is a phrase
That fill
which
the glass.
filled. Sorry.
Yeah, that filled the glass.
Yes, probably the last drop that filled the glass for me was my quite sadly unsuccessful beginnings as a teacher, and one might have a certain expectation to the high status and prestigious schools. People might think that they are they have developed the greater culture, or they got the better base of knowledge, or anything like that. But in my case, I was a teacher of ethics in two of the most prestigious schools in Lithuania. I think both of them were at that time in top 20, and sadly, a teacher of ethics somehow did not find comfort in within the community of the teachers, which is strange, I'd say, considering that I was a professional of moral education, that my attitude and knowledge was enough to convince them to apply me, to accept me, to take that role and those responsibilities. And yet somehow, when I have started doing some creative steps, expanding, building up the my work profile, I would say, despite some successes and some failures, of course, which weren't that bad, I'd say. Something did not just work. Something just didn't work, and I got really confused because of that. I knew that I am coming to the job with open heart to everyone, both people which I had. I welcomed everyone, even the most the biggest provocateurs, even the biggest provocateurs, actually. And one case was actually quite funny, when there were two girls who just were so bad to me. They didn't give me any space for breathing. They were well read, they were smart, they were creative, and maybe even hated me at some point to some degree, because I just loved it, and I loved the challenge. And I remember that I have arranged, I used to work as a high fashion model at that time as well.
Okay.
So during one event, I've met one star, one Lithuanian star, one of the biggest names in Lithuania. And I have invited him to my school to make like a TV show, some sort of TV show with kids. And the design of my idea was quite simple. I just thought, if those girls have some courage to challenge me in all of those regards, I thought, if I would use all of this energy, if I wouldn't take it personally and try to redirect it towards something good, it would be very successful thing. It would give me a lot of insight, which I would want to have with a teacher, and it would give them the platform to actually capitalize on all of that energy, and grow. So I took a concept which I have seen in other country, and I applied it to the teenagers and to the context of the teenage life, and the name of that TV show was The School of Bad Mouthing.
Okay.
So the basic idea was to allow those girls to actually learn how they could do their favorite thing they have shared during my lessons so eagerly, uh, where they could use that in a very forward-thinking way. So
Okay.
by the design of that concept, the guest which comes to the show is being bombarded with many difficult questions, giving no breathing space for them. So they would have to answer in the most meaningful way, either admitting to some failures or revealing some meanings which my people would be able to stand on firmly. So it was basically the concept of no losses. Basically, in all regards, you would win. You would learn how to formulate, how to state a question, how to provoke authentic answers, how to provoke and get authentic answers, and things like that. And what happened was quite um, mind-blowing I thing. For me, it was I didn't know how to wrap my mind around it. The administration of my school started finding some issues with me and with the idea.
Was
And
this
first,
high school?
sorry.
Oh, was this a high school or what level of
Yes,
education?
so I'm talking about the high school, and my people were um, 14 to 18, that age range,
Yeah, yeah. Typical.
speaking. So this is basically those were basically the schools which were aiming at raising the generation which could achieve a lot, right? Applying different universities both in Lithuania and abroad as well. So I thought that critical thinking would be something of a high demand
Yeah, yeah.
for there. So the whole concept of the School of Bad Mouthing, the guest of a solid status and decent achievements, all of that was sort of well defined, and yet somehow administration found some issues with me, I guess, in particular, because the concept-wise, they, I think, wouldn't be able to challenge anything in that respect, I think. But anyway, I think I was just probably too bold and too creative and too daring, and probably I've started those, organizing, arranging those, arranging my projects too soon, I guess, without establishing some trust between me and the administration. I guess that might be the thing which I would have to consider a bit deeper. But regardless of that, they said to me that they wouldn't borrow me those kids during the time of during the general time of when they would have some other lessons. which is quite a well spread culture among the teachers. Everybody does that, so it shouldn't be an issue. But there was some list of how would you say that conditions that they wanted me to meet, and one of them was to make it with the least complications, with as little complications as I could cause by doing my project. So they didn't allow me to do that project when I have arranged when during the time which was arranged with a big star. And so instead of that, I thought, okay, I'll do it in the smoothest way possible, I thought. So I have waited until the Christmas time, when kids went to the when they had the holidays. And usually, that was the time before the COVID, so kids did not miss the school too much, if that makes sense, right? And yet those girls, they were quite happy to come to the school regardless of that. And Marius Marijonas, that's the name of the star whom I engaged with. He was happy to come during that time as well. So no issues with anyone else. I didn't interrupt any lessons. The kids came during their spare time. The school wasn't busy. I have arranged everything, and Marijonas came to my school, and then I'm being called to the office of the principal, and then I have the same silly situation where I'm being challenged for no good reason, but then they couldn't tell me to actually cancel the event because because Marijonas was already there. So so that was the peak at that school, and that was the first school that I have started teaching at. So those kind of nonsense situations, they would follow me along my way, and I did not understand how and why, and are they stupid? Am I stupid? Who doesn't get, and what do we not get there? So that's the stuff which was which overfilled my glass of patience. And since I tried to execute on everything to the best of my ability, and since I did that honestly and wholeheartedly, I just realized at some point that I have to take some time off and reassess my actions, try to reevaluate my maybe values, the principles I was driven by, to think more about the culture of the education that we have in Lithuania. So that was basically the background. That was basically the last step that I've made before I came here to UK. So when I came here to UK, I wanted to have a distance from everything basically that was familiar to me, to understand the influences that I had in those areas, by the people I was hanging out with, to understand my own impulses as well. So this time in UK, those 5 years since I came in 2015, that was the time for my re-evaluation of myself and the situations that I had.
For your introspection.
Yeah. And I did that in a very unusual way. I tried
Okay.
to stick to the methods, to the scientific methods, and to respect everything I've learned on my way. And I've exposed myself to a lot of different stuff, both scientific things and in the area of art, the theaters, and some mystical experiences. Everything I could, everything I knew as popular or controversial, I wanted to have a grasp on those things, just to be, just to have a solid base for my professional, activity, I guess, or something like that. So I would be able to explain the kids what's happening in different areas of life. Basically, I wanted to, my passionate desire was to raise the generation of strong and passionate leaders, because I realized at some point that the dreams which I have, which I had myself, that they are too broad, that I wouldn't be able to achieve everything. So at least I wanted to be satisfied that if that wouldn't be me, that it will be someone else, and that I will contribute in every way available to me for them to achieve some great things with something that my students would be passionate about. So
Okay.
this is
So,
basically the shortest explanation, I would say.
are
Yeah.
you still teaching these days?
No, I do not teach. Like I said, I left. I came to UK because I wanted to distance myself, to create a distance from everything that was familiar to me. So I could have, went to. I could have started modeling here. I could have started teaching or coordinating projects or anything like this. But instead of that, I went to work as a driver's mate. I went to work as a kitchen chef. I went to work as a sales assistant. Basically, all the things which didn't quite require any greater intelligence, at least on the levels which I was engaging in those jobs at. Mm. But the whole design was based on one quite simple premise, because I was confused with the social relationships. I thought, well, starting from the first principles, and those were the links which I have sent to you. I thought, where should I start to where should I start deconstructing my experience, and how should I reconstruct it? And I thought, if I can't identify the boundaries in human relationships, what could be the controlled environment where I would be able to track at least something within the relationships? And one of the most obvious answers for me was probably that probably the ideal environment would be a job, right? I thought, if I would focus on the job relationships, right, where we have some specific values quite well defined, like respect, the teamwork, the communication styles, responsibility. Some things are regulated, or they are quite defined, So I thought if I would just focus on that, if I would
I could argue against it, but I will let you finish. I'll tell you my thoughts about it.
Okay. I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
So essentially, when I had that idea, I thought, what would be the core principle which I could build effectively on? And then one friend suggested an English word to me, which became sort of the thing which everything at this point is I have built around, and that was to be keen to do every job you're asked to do, to be keen, right? So I thought, if I will start with that, at least I won't have any issues or any complaints from any other side, right? That taught me a lot, but that's a different story for a different time, a different day probably. But when I have started building on that, first of all, I'll just identify that the biggest challenge was the fact that people noticed that and started taking an advantage of me. Right? It's quite predictable, right?
Yeah.
So, but because my sort of crisis was so deep, that that I had to ground myself quite firmly. When all of those things, all of those situations, those kind of situations started happening, I knew that I have to stick with my principle, right? Regardless of the discomfort, emotional discomfort, all of this aggressive sometimes reaction that I had within myself, I had to stick with my basic principle, and at least to calm myself enough to see what I can find on the other side of that experience. So internally, when I had all of this massive sort of personal experience, on the other side, I discovered that I was just seeing people who were struggling to succeed with their responsibilities, who were asking for help and didn't know how to say thank you, honestly, right? So when I have learned that, when I have identified that, at some point I started pitying those people, right? And that's how I've met some condescending attitude of mine, because I felt much stronger. I felt, okay, so I can see where you're coming from. I can see that it is painful to you. And I feel calmer in that situation than you. Even when I help you, you are still in a distress, which I am not experiencing, right? So I had some I've built some comfort within myself, which which basically placed me on the same track of arrogance, which I kind of had before in Lithuania, because I was, achieving, like, getting to the places which a lot of people fancied, like being a high fashion model or teaching in a prestigious schools or some things like that. So I was familiar with my self-esteem. I was familiar with, I knew quite well that I can be quite arrogant sometimes. So when I have identified this arch between the starting point of being keen to do every job I'm asked to do, and getting like to the place where I become arrogant again, because I yet again developed something strong within myself, right? I've learned to crush that impulses, and those ones were the ones which I have mentioned in the first place, where I told you that I built the experience here, so for myself to identify what kind of influences did I have from the others, and to identify what kind of impulses did I have by myself, right? So that was kind of set up. That's where I have started, developing my experience here in UK. So, and you wanted to say something about that?
Well, yeah, everything you said stirred up a lot of ideas in my head, so hopefully I can remember it all. But what I would point out, at least tell them to you briefly, and then we can expand. Uh, First of all, I'm not familiar with the Lithuanian school system, but generally, I don't think that a school system, especially a state school, would be a fit place for these ideas, because generally the whole educational system in most of the countries is designed to provide employees, not free thinkers, not people that will succeed on their own. Because generally a state, a government has this approach where they say, okay, what do we need? We need an amount of this population educated that needs to know these basic things and that needs to approach these jobs and do these things. It's not in their interest to develop free thinkers. So that sort of education which you are trying to promote, a person would get outside the school system. Now, again, I'm not familiar with the Lithuanian school system. Maybe it's better, maybe it's pushing also in this direction, but generally speaking, from what I've seen in other countries, in other experiences, it rather matches what I said. Second, on the importance of these principles, I find it fundamental. It's fundamental to have some solid principle for yourself as a human, no matter who you are, no matter which those principles are, because the reality that surrounds you can change anytime. It can be torn apart, shaken. A lot of things can happen that will definitely rearrange your reality throughout a lifetime. But if you have some solid principles, those are the things that you can always go back to, and that will tell you who you are, no matter what happens around you. And that can guide your choices and what you're doing. Because see, you've also brought this aspect about jobs, and especially in a jobs and the way our Western culture is built, sometimes you are given opportunities which, in order to follow, you would have to derail from your set of principles. It's often that case. You are given this choice. Let's say you may want to stick to your principles and decline this opportunity that is being presented to you at some point, or you could take it. You have some reward presented at the end of it, but you have to abandon your principle. And the problem with that is that once you abandon it, your brain will not know what to think of it anymore, because it's abandoning the true self it has built in there. And since you were on my website, yeah,
I'll just add a quick word to that. Those things which you have said just now, those are the ones which are related to the mystical experiences or mystical exposure to the mystical things, which I have mentioned before, because you probably are familiar with an idea of with the ideas of Buddhist teachings, or the teachings which teach you to detach yourself from your passions or desires, to be sort of neutral, or rather whole, maybe. It depends on the point of view. But yeah, I can see those things when I have heard you saying like addressing those things, but probably that's not what you have meant.
Yeah, what I was trying to say earlier, and I will get back to this idea of exploring things, um, is that especially in at a workplace, in a job, for example, where you are saying you are trying to capture this true nature nowadays, that's a tricky place because most people project an image at their workplace, uh, a way in which they would want to be seen, something that aligns basically to an image that they think is going to bring them happiness, because a lot of people tend to associate, let's say, happiness with achieving a certain social status validated through a job role in a company, usually at the top, and with the money that comes with it, again usually. And they tend to believe that, okay, once I'm gonna get there, getting that role or that amount of money, I'm going to be happy. And obviously it never happens in that way. But uh, they can see from what we get in our cultural context that in order to get there, you have to behave in a certain way, or you have to be a certain model. So they take this projected image and head towards it. But that's not their true self. And this is the thing that happens uh, when this gap between the true self and the projected image is getting larger and larger and larger, and you are abandoning your basic principles. That's a sure path in the end to depression. Because at first it causes something that is called a cognitive dissonance. Basically, the brain doesn't know what to believe anymore. Said, hold on, we didn't used to like this. We weren't like this. Imagine the brain talking to the true self. Come on, this is not us. What are you doing here? And it's seeing this other image behaving in a different way in front of other people and displaying some characteristics which are not part of the true self. And the brain is not understanding anymore. What are you trying to do? But you are driving that fake image there, hoping to achieve some form of happiness or greater reward, something that would make you feel good, which personally I connect to happiness. But you
Mhm.
get there, you abandon your principles and your true person. You get there and realize there's nothing in there. You've struggled perhaps for years, for decades maybe, to get at that point, and there's nothing in there. That it's very difficult, especially after you've gone on a certain path a number of years, to accept that, okay, this is a wrong path. So what are you going to do then? And I had this sort of teacher of mine that was saying, the first thing to do if you fall in a ditch or in a hole with a pickaxe in your hand, the first thing to do is to stop the digging. So don't go further that way. Just stop and try to get out. So even if you've taken a wrong path for a number of years, no matter how how deep you went on a certain path, and at some point you realize it's wrong, just go back and screw what other think. It's not your problem what the others will think, because they're not living your life. If it's bad for you, just switch. You can do that. I mean, it's your life. You're sort of responsible to do that. And this is where the exploring part comes in, because I sort of have the same approach that you described. I mean, I believe that first of all, that nothing in this world is entirely bad or entirely good. And there are bits that if you don't explore them for yourself, you won't know for sure if they are good for you or bad for you. You just get what others or the media is presenting to you. And I mean, you don't need to go in depth on every little thing in there, but sometimes when you have this opportunity for a certain new experience, or exploring a new culture or a new philosophy or something like that, there might be a bit of truth in there which aligns with your beliefs or what you need on your life, or maybe the missing piece of the puzzle that was missing in your bigger picture. And all in all, it gathers. I mean, everything uh, will pile up, all this knowledge piles up on top of each other, and it gets you on a higher place up the ladder, on the ladder of knowledge. It sounds very philosophical. That's the way it is.
Well, I think that I can understand your approach quite well, and it would be it would be nice to explore those things much more, which I think we wouldn't probably do right now. I can just say that I wanted to find out all the essential elements that which have an important role in those kind of questions. Again, with the purpose to be able to explain them to my kids, my pupil, if I will ever start to teach again, you know. And I want to. So, but at this point, I have a very strong condition for that case, because I have already said that, and I've already said that to my student, whom I had a conversation with and recorded it on Skype the same way, which is really cool, by the way. I just like to do a segue, because the way that recording will come out, as a recorded file, it will have like two equally separated windows for both your side and mine. So it will be kind of ready as a podcast material. Let's put it this way, right? And another thing which is quite useful on this app is that it allows you to keep that file for 30 days, and it doesn't require any space from you. So you can come back to it and download it at any time within those 30 days, and which is and another probably quite handy feature is that you can share, for example, the details of your account if you are doing that sort of professionally, in a low-key professional way. You can share it with someone, let's say another filmmaker, who can be in a completely different country or what, and they can download it instantly and start working on it. So it's like, considering the circumstances which you have engaged with me because of, I would say, I found the best way how to optimize the process of the filmmaking and generating the material. So that is one of them. So if you will ever want to have any effortless tool to do something like that, this is the best option that you would have as well. So as an educator, I have collected quite a few of those, so I would be able to share them too. So here you go. So what I was saying before I said that, yeah, I said that I had a condition, and that condition is that I will not come back to Lithuania to teach the younger generation, which I care about, until those schools will not grant me an apology. So I have enough dignity, and I have clarified all of those issues well enough to understand that I had not violated anything at all, to the degree, where we would understand that as a young professional, you would make some mistakes. You would miscommunicate yourself sometimes. or you might be too ambitious at some point, or anything like this. But considering the talents which I have no doubts about at this point, the ones which I have cultivated in within myself, I demand respect for that quite firmly at this point. So this is the condition which I'm challenging myself with, actually, more than those schools, because in order for them to actually realize that they would want to do that, not have to, but want to, right? They should display something of the caliber which wouldn't command, but would rather inspire, if that makes sense. So if I will start contributing to other cultures, other countries, or other social groups, in the ways which would be of high demand to my own country, that is more that's I think a challenge for myself much more than I'm challenging them with that condition. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, nowadays you're not bounded anymore to any physical boundaries like those of a country, because
Say,
once your ideas and your material is on the internet, it's available worldwide.
true say,
So,
and I have thought through that as well. So it's quite simple, you know. You can share this material, like for example, Jordan Peterson shares it, right? And people can learn from you, from your conversations, from the lectures that you give. But then you have so much more being in the same room with that kind of person, and so much more flexibility. It's not a passive engagement where you just get the source of information and then you're left on your own. So you have an opportunity of mentorship, right? The creative direction, you know. You have so much more when you have a teacher next to you, yourself, you know. And considering that the fact that you like you say I could do that even through the distance, that does not satisfy my need. My need to be the person who is standing next to them.
but you know, I'm just curious. I mean, perhaps you've asked yourself this or explored it at some point, but I'm rather wondering, have you ever stopped to question what's driving you to do all this? And I'll tell you why I'm asking this, because there's one thing, this is something I found at some point, and I found it really beautiful. It was something saying that all the professions or hobbies that are trying to, or actually the people that are trying to understand human nature, whether it is through psychology, through astrology, through philosophy, or all these people are actually trying to understand the people next to them in a way that they themselves were not understood. And this quote was saying that in a way it's a form of language of love, if you want, trying to understand the people around you this way. But also see this driving you not only to understand them, but also to form these people. And okay, from the psychological point of view, and based on my training so far, I'm getting a glimpse in there, so I'm not going to make any statement, just ask you if you ever wondered what drove you on this path of philosophy and ethics in particular.
Well, my background, the background which I come from, have presented me a lot of questions. And being and having a curious mind, I was quite eager to explore them in as many ways as possible. So considering that, you know, I wouldn't even I wouldn't even be able to identify any sort of any leverage in, for example, those negative experiences that I had in a comparison to the levels of curiosity that I have carried. So I was way more curious than I was hurting, if that makes sense.
Okay, you were trying to understand.
Because essentially, when you address those things, you know, the priming motivations, right, and the setup for them. When you address those things, you are addressing things like you know, among those things could be bullying at school, which I had. There could be violence at home, which I have seen. There could be many things which I would be able to, you know, speak about, and then they could elude you. They could mislead you. You could start thinking that those were actually the reasons why I started, you know, pursuing some of those answers which I was aiming at, you know. But I will give you one example which will explain to you my personal nature, I would say, you know. Since I have mentioned that I've seen some violence at home, if I would specify that, if I would tell you that it was my dad, if I would tell you that he had, and that's a different story, some peculiar experience with religions, and at some point he started justifying his actions from the moral ground, which was way more sacred than the traditional narrative of the power dynamic, you know. So considering those things, at some point I have identified that, and I was about probably 14 years old, something like that. I have identified that I could ask him questions which he would struggle to answer. And not just questions which I would base on my knowledge or my experience or something like this, but his knowledge, his propositions. So you are familiar probably with the term active listening. So I was blessed enough with all of my troubles in my life to start doing that intuitively, and through the discovery, which I was quite excited about actually, because when I have discovered that I can listen carefully to my dad and then ask him how would his explanations of certain things, how would they lead to the conclusions which he would want me to convince with, right? I've trained myself to trap him intellectually at a very early stage, which gave me so much pleasure. Obviously, right? It was sort of my it gave me a lot of relief, right? But much more than that, I was just excited for the whole simplicity of such a thing, you know. When I discovered that I don't have to have any knowledge at all that I can just simply listen to what another person says, and by listening carefully, I can just come up with some with some potential outcomes, with some situations, which could contradict that statement, right? Provided to me. When I have discovered that, it became for me a game, right? So I focused my attention on the things which I was exploring myself, rather than the things which I was being trapped with circumstantially, you know. So that situation probably should explain to you why I'm saying that I was curious much more than I was hurting, despite the fact that there was a lot of pain, enough of it, right?
Yeah, I can understand that, and personally, I think you would love psychology because it would fill in a lot of pieces of the puzzle there for
Sorry,
you.
what did I love?
Psychology, I think you would love it, uh, especially psychology connecting to personality disorders and the personality construct. And
That was my initial aim. That was the thing which, and actually applied after I finished my school. I applied only to psychology, and
nice.
I didn't get accepted. I didn't have strong grades of mathematics.
I don't see
So,
why you need mathematics for that, but anyway, you don't need
well,
the diploma, you need just the knowledge,
statistics.
and the knowledge is out there. I mean, exactly what I was saying, it's out there on the internet, you just have to go and pick it, but it would feel a lot of the things in there. And
As an educator, I had to have a lot of courses of psychology, the psychology of development, the psychology of communication, and
okay,
things like.
if you're looking at it from the job perspective, from the curricula you have to meet for the job, okay, that's a different story. But strictly for the knowledge itself and to absorb that knowledge, all the information is at hand right now. And what I believe is that, okay, in this situation, for example, that you are describing, a more interesting question is what drove or what put, in this case, just to pick this example, but don't need to go into details. The more interesting question is what drove your father to behave in a certain way, which from what you've told me was basically an obsessive compulsive disorder, just giving you a hint there. But it's obviously an experience because our experiences form us and the way we behave. And the thing I like the most these days, and probably at some point I will head towards this direction because I'm evolving myself, was that I strongly believe in reconstructing the personality. And this is a fact. I mean, it can be done, but it's a lengthy process. But obviously, in order to get there,
If you could wait for a sec, it's a bit cold here. By the way, I have some coffee, so I'll just grab
yeah, feel free to.
a warm drink as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
enjoy. So the point I was trying to make is that our experiences shape us, and um, because our personality starts to shape up in early childhood, where we may first adverse experiences, ranging from the context we have in our family up to, I don't know, maybe bullying at school or other experiences that happen. Those are shaping up a certain personality and influence our choices further. And they are trying to put us in a pattern that's familiar afterwards. What I'm trying to say, to just to make it easier to understand, if you grew up, and I'm not saying you in particular, if you as a listener of this podcast, let's say, grew up in a context where you experienced a lot of suffering, for example, your brain will determine you to seek a familiar situation even afterwards. So you, without being aware of it, you will seek situations that will keep on making you suffer because that's your familiar state. And to get out of it, of course, the first thing to do is to understand that you are in that spot and what put you in there in the first place in order to break the pattern. But the best part comes afterward because once you understand it, you are able to rebuild it and to rearrange the puzzle in a manner that suits you, to build the picture you want. And it's not a short-term effort. It takes a bit of time, ranging from months to years, but it can be done. And even if it takes years, we can call it a one-time effort to shape yourself in the direction you want. And this reminds me also of something I've been writing recently. It makes you think twice about the tags that define your identity and the tags that you want to accept further, and it gives you the possibility to re-tag yourself with the tags that you want, and your brain will start drive you in that direction because that's what it does. It will abandon the old explanatory models and the old behavioral patterns once you are telling him, look, this is the new you, this is what you're going to do now. At first the brain will not know what to do, but after a while say, okay, this is the new me, this is what I have to do. You can actually reshape it, but it takes a lot of effort, which can come only after a lot of introspection.
This is exactly what I've done during those 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, just one little point. When the videos are being stitched together, they are being cropped from both sides equally. So to have the best sort of composition, you would want to stay in the center of the frame. That's why I'm saying yes.
Okay.
A little technical nuance.
I can't
Yes.
control the bouncing, however, because I'm sitting on a huge rubber ball in here, not an actual chair.
Feel free to turn your camera than to turn your phone. Yeah. But anyway, when you have mentioned all of this about the brain reframing, readjusting, fighting itself again from scratch, you know, if we would just leave it like this, considering that I have mentioned to you that I started deconstructing and reconstructing my ethics and understanding about the external, internal processes, right? With that, I can see either that what you have said was not connected to what I have said previously, if that makes sense, or that you have tried to direct my attention, to direct me towards something else. So I'm kind of a bit confused here.
It's a different point of view on the same matter because you see, you are viewing a lot of things from the philosophical perspective, let's say, and also I would say a bit biased by your own experience because you can't separate it from yourself since we're talking about your own life and there you obviously can't separate. While I'm looking at things more from the psychological perspective and from the explanations that psychology gives, with the sole difference that when I'm referring to this, I'm not trying to pick a model from the books. That's why I said I like applied psychology that takes actual behaviors, actual patterns, real people, and explains how they went from point A to point B. So it's a matter of vantage point of the same aspect. You were addressing things, as you said, from the logical point of view, challenging the belief, challenging the reasoning behind a certain action. I'm saying that there's also an explanation based on behavioral models and what led to that behavior in the first place.
The setup, the conditions.
Yeah.
So if I understand you correctly, you are trying to say that there are some patterns which are which psychology defines objectively, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Because
scientific.
because they are defined at a high level. Like for example, I don't know, just picking a random example here, like the fear of abandonment. Okay, which is at the core of certain behavior that show up afterwards. But then you have also the coping mechanisms, which can be good or bad, and those are individual. Those are very specific.
So
So
those would be the traumas, and it's related to the denial which a person could have. Is that correct?
the trauma would be before, let's say, the fear of abandonment or another fear that shows up in a person's life. But the thing with traumas is that by understanding them, you have two ways of managing them. Either you decompose enough the trauma, understand it, and in the end you keep minimizing it until it doesn't matter anymore, or it could be a trauma that's strong enough that you can't overcome, like I don't know, like a severe aggression, let's say, or losing someone, and that trauma you can in the end, after a certain effort, you can encapsulate it to a level where it doesn't reaches in other areas of your life anymore, and you can carry on without influences from that particular trauma. These are usually the two mechanisms in which trauma can be handled, either minimized enough so that it doesn't matter anymore, if it's possible, or encapsulated so that it doesn't reach and impacts other areas of your life. And once you understand what it has generated and what are the coping mechanisms you resort to, it becomes easier to rearrange your life. And you start challenging why you did certain actions and why you had certain choices and why you are where you are at this point and what you need to change in order to get to a different point.
Are there any recommendations which you can which you have formulated which you could which you want to direct me towards, or in my mind, what I'm thinking right now is that I do not see how what you've just said, actually applies to me, because I have considered those things. But if I would just say that I have already thought through that, that might insult your actually maybe really the kindest impulses or inclinations that might be driven by saying those things. But so I'm kind of trying to avoid sharp corners here. I don't want to tell you that I get what you are saying, and it is more than that. But at the same time, um,
Well,
I
the
would
point.
want to I would want to hear something really solid. So if you have any directions, like literally recommendations, that would be much that would be really helpful to understand where are we going with that kind of angle of our conversation.
Well, the first questions to ask, okay, in your case in particular, would be: is there anything that's bothering you at the moment in a way that you would want to change it? Because if you are fine and satisfied with everything that's happening in your life at all levels, I don't know, personal, romantic, social, professional, if you're satisfied in every aspect of your life and you don't want to change anything, then that's fine. You are where you are, and that's fine if you're okay with it, if you're truly okay with it. Other than that, the exercise that I recommend anyone, and it could be a starting point for exploration, would be to try to realize what defines you nowadays. Which are the tags that define your identity nowadays? And it's a really simple exercise that anybody can do at home. You can just take a piece of paper if you want, uh, and write down those attributes that define yourself today. And these attributes, just to explain, could be something like beautiful, smart, stubborn, um, an exceptional driver. So it's not necessarily one word, it could be two or three words, and you could put all the things that define you nowadays. But
So
there will be.
may I suggest a personal example here, so
Mhm,
we would make some a better context.
mhm.
So if how about dignified? How about dignified? When I'm saying that, when I have said that I would want those schools to grant me an apology, right? Not grant me an apology, to apologize, right? So that could be a sort of ambition of being dignified when you've been humiliated previously. So would that kind of situation would be one of those setups which you are trying to address right now?
Well, the problem is, what is the tag that resulted from this? Have you accepted a tag from this, like humiliated, for example? Did that become something that would define your action these days? Because if you would consider yourself, for example, humiliated, it doesn't matter by whom. The resulting behavior could be something of fighting back, of feeling like a victim and trying to um, revolt against an authority or something. There could be some implications from here. But the point is that if you are putting together this list with good and bad tags and you identify one that you don't like because you know what's causing in your life, or you don't like what's driving right now in your life, the easiest thing you can do is just, I mean, it's easier if you're doing this in a visual manner, like actually cutting with some scissors all those tags so that you can see them in front of you, and just put aside those that you don't want anymore, and instead of those, write some new tags. Even if you feel that they don't define you at this moment, just write some new tags and put those in front of you and decide that those will decide you from here onwards. Because this is the beauty of the brain. The brain will know what to do with them and will know how to start behaving according to those. So for example, if we take this, let's say the tag was humiliated, okay, and instead of that you would put, what would be the opposite? Respected, right? It would be a good enough tag, right? The opposite.
Or dignified?
Okay, or dignified. I'm just trying to think now if our listeners or viewers would be able to relate more to dignify or to respect it. But either of those, you would put one of those instead. And from that moment on, and actually, when it comes to respect, there is a saying that nobody will respect you more than you respect yourself. So respect will start with you from the inside. But once you put that in there, and your brain will get, okay, this is the new instruction I have received, this is part of the new identity, it will not tolerate anymore any behavior from the outside. Okay, it would be gradual, but it will not tolerate anymore any other behavior that would refer to the old tag which you discarded, and it will try to create a reality around the new identity, around the new tag that you've put in there. Sounds a bit complex, but it actually isn't. You just need to set the direction, and the brain will know what to do and how to align everything around you. But it takes time. Sometimes it takes also some guidance. It requires to work on personal development and to explore yourself in order to become basically a better version. Because
Mhm.
That's what we're aiming for in general, or at least we should be aiming for, to become better versions of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I cannot relate to that. I have to be honest. From my perspective, it seems. I'll tell you a quick story. At some point, when I was a kid, I discovered that there was a tree of Greek nuts in Lithuania, and it blew my mind. I thought, wow, I have to check it out. So, and it was a day which was quite rainy. And I discovered it, and I just waited till it will stop raining, and I went there, and I love to climb the trees. There was like next to our house, there was a kindergarten, and
Yeah.
it had trees along the fence. And I just at some point, inspired by Tarzan, I went on one side and just climbed.
Slipped.
No, climbed like over the tops of those trees, all of that line. So I was quite skilled with it. So
Okay.
I was quite courageous in and I went to climb that tree to find the Greek nuts, and then I slipped, right? And I
Yes.
slipped, and it was about the second story. Um, in English terms, that would be like the ground floor, the first floor, and the second. So by Lithuanian estimations, that would be like the third floor. We would say we
Wow,
don't
so
call
it's pretty
ground.
high, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So and I landed quite badly on my back, and it was a time where we didn't have any telephones, any mobile phones, and I was glad to have some friends around me. So they have carried me back home, and there was like a big, you know, situation there. And I got to the hospital. And that time my dad was already religious, and what he decided to do was to go to the church straight away and to pray for me with the church. And my mom went with me to the hospital. Um, who should be where and who should do what, it's another story, uh, um, but that's how it went. And the funny side of the story was that they have discovered a lot of blood when they had tested my condition. They have discovered a lot of blood in my kidneys. And the next day, there was almost none of it in my kidneys after my dad have prayed. That's how he took it, right?
Yeah, because that was the explanatory model that he provided for what happened.
So the doctors, when they were testing the how is it called, the dialysis, how my condition regresses or progresses, they didn't find any explanation to that, right? Because scientifically speaking, that didn't make sense. My dad had some friends who had some esoteric powers. He have approached them as well to have a different perspective too, not just a Christian one or scientific one. They were bamboozled too with that situation, so he didn't get any explanations. He concluded that that was God. And me, with my experience and my curious mind, I realized that I can't make any sense of it. So I won't make one. So I decided that I will not project anything which I decided that I would rather have to leave that subject instead of making any claims about it, right? If I can't understand it by myself. But my dad had a very strong opinion about it either. So, considering that situation, I kind of had a very strong incentive to not speculate with things I do not understand. Right? So even when I mentioned that I had explored or when I had exposed myself to some mystical things, right? One of the greatest things which have contributed to my understanding of those things was the conference about the mysticism, which happened in my faculty at uni, where one of the most accomplished philosophers participated as well, Thomas Sodeka. So there were a lot of different presentations about the mysticism, and basically those presentations have built the necessary foundation for me to figure out quite a few answers in those subjects on my way. So the subjects of reconstruction of your identity, the subject of finding your true self, the subjects of your passions or desires, or all of those subjects which could be related to some spiritual experiences, considering as well that I have studied in a faculty of Catholic theology as well. Considering all of those things and my anecdotal evidence with supernatural experience from my persona, first-person experience, right? Considering all of this, I would just say that what I'm aiming at is a clarity of mind, regardless of the experiences, and how would you be inclined to call them, whether that would be whether you would want to build a narrative around the spiritual or mystical elements in a specific experience, or whether you would want to build a scientific explanation. I don't care about all of that. What I care about is clarity. If you can address something in a way which will help someone to identify it, almost like science-like, if you would address something which would allow me to discover the same experience, if you would tell me something meaningful, I would consider that. That's why I prefer to stay with the terminology of meanings instead of science and spirituality, because practically speaking, and that comes from my professional area of ethics, practically speaking, eventually all of your narratives, all of your stories should lead somewhere, right? And if they do not lead anywhere, well, we could call them meaningless, right? When we think about the leadership, effective leadership, or the leadership which we miss these days, those critical times where people are complaining that there are no leaders, that there is no meaning, nobody does anything, any meaningful actions, nobody finds any meaningful solutions, right? All of this narrative, all of this vocabulary speaks to me as a simple fact that there is no connection between the cause which is addressed and the consequence, right? So what I would look in modern leaders would be a very simple thing. If you can say something and it could lead somewhere effectively to build a resolution of some issues, let's maybe stay as abstract as that, but at least even if we will not have any language to define it specifically, at least we will have a chance to avoid unnecessary elements in our storytelling, right, which could mislead in so many different ways. That's why, for example, I find this problem between the left and right, like they call it in UK, in USA, right, in the United States. I find it funny. I find it funny because they try to address towards some meanings which they define with some symbols, with a symbolic language, which represents something to them, right? Instead of understanding the meanings which are common for us without our preference of symbols. Does that make sense?
Well, I believe you have a nice ambition there, and I can see where you're heading. But at this point of our human evolution, let's say, as a species, unfortunately, we are not evolved enough to leave aside selfish interests and to make room for focusing on the greater good. And that's why a lot of the actions these days, especially at the political level, are targeted on controlling the masses, whether they are rallying them around an idea, around a flag, around a philosophy, around whatever it is in there. It's about controlling the masses for rather a selfish interest. But luckily, in time, and I don't think either of us will get to see that, hopefully people will get at a higher level of knowledge and awareness, of self-awareness, where they would care more about the greater good or the overall good of
Okay,
everyone.
so right here, we land exactly on the point, which is at the foundation of the projects which I am working on, right? Because from the background of my acquired knowledge and my acquired experience, right, I do not see how the focus on the clarity is counterproductive in finding a solution, right? It is very difficult because it requires you to generalize and specify the things in a specific way, avoiding some elements which you might have some psychological preference towards, right?
Mhm.
Either left or right, scientific, spiritual, whatever, right? If you just stay on the level of abstractions, which define the fundamental principles. That's why I sent to you those the links about the fundamental principles, which Elon Musk is famous for, advancing his philosophy in his business as well, practically speaking, and doing that quite successfully as well, actually. So fundamental principles, if we can identify how to address some things in a way which might be a little bit abstract, but if it would avoid unnecessary elements which might mislead us, I think sticking with the principle of clarity could help us to actually find some solutions which will not distract us from anything else that could what could build essentially the camps which would go against each other, right? So just strategy wise, just pure strategy wise, if you would want to find a common ground, I think a clarity would be a good aim. It's practical, right? If you don't want to be practical, if you want to advance your agenda, right, your political agenda, the agenda of your beliefs, everyone is free to do whatever they want, and there is no common ground. There is only fight as an option there, right? If you believe that you are flawed as a human being, if you believe that you aren't sacred, if you believe that you do errors, right? I see no reason at all to just stick with clarity. And like you say, there might be some discouragement that we have already everything that's needed to deal with those issues effectively right now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think around 200 years ago, there was one funny guy called Hegel, I think. But actually that was originally it was a different fella. It was Fichte, who have proposed a simple concept of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right? And the idea, if I would have to define it to the kids, right, I would put it in very simple terms, and I would describe it this way. Every thesis, every proposition that you might have, right, every one of those which you have and carry as the pinnacle of your understanding. Let's call that a thesis, right? Every thesis can have antithesis, something contradictory, right? I can say I'm pro-abortion, you can say you are against. I can say I believe that traveling by planes is the ideal, the most ideal way for a travel. You might say hiking is the one, right? I might say I love to eat chicken. You might say that cows in the blue don't mean anything. And I would think, what? It's like it doesn't even have to make sense, you know. Every thesis can have antithesis. And for me, my thesis comes out as the most cohesive conclusion. For you, your conclusions come out from your experience and knowledge as the top of the top, right? So Fichte or Hegel later could say, you know, if we again speak on the level of kids, if you understand that my conclusion is based on my context, yours is based on yours, what if you would merge those contexts, and what if you would come with a synthesis, right, which would become a new thesis? So in a debate or in an argument, we do not have to blindly try to defend, you know, either me, my thesis, or I don't have to blindly just surrender at some point if I will run out of the arguments and just commit to your antithesis, to adapt it as my own and make that thesis. We can come up with something completely new, completely novel, right? To make synthesis. So this fella, around 200 years ago, have proposed this idea: thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's elegant. It's simple. You can explain it. You can explain it to the kids.
Yeah.
Effortless.
And it matches what I was saying, that nothing is entirely bad or entirely good. You can take bits and pieces of everything and make a new image in there.
Essentially, that's why I'm aiming towards a clarity, and I said that from the very beginning. I want to have clarity, a clean understanding around those things, around all of those matters which we have addressed or mentioned tonight, right? I want to have the clarity which would allow me to explain it to the kids. If I can't challenge myself with clarity, what kind of standard I'm aiming at as a teacher, right? Whether that would be the clarity which I need for myself, whether that is a clarity which I need to have a pleasant conversation with you in a social setup, just the clarity, at least, let's be clear. Not just frank with each other, but clear, So for example, when I told you that I couldn't relate myself to something that you have said in this conversation, if you would be oversensitive, right, because of all of those cultural influences these days, I could offend you just simply by stating that. But were you offended?
No.
Easy,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that is the perspective which I'm advancing with, building the semi-synod project. I have figured out a few influences, like cultural
It's true.
tendencies, right? Some time ago, and I have projected already that we will have the moment when we will get stuck in our conversations, right? Some elements of attitudes which even Jordan Peterson carries, or the camp of his teammates, quote unquote, like Brett Weinstein and Sam Harris, blah, blah, right? Some attitudes that they carry, they are quite misleading even by their own standards. It's like if I'm listening to them the way I've listened to my dad, right? Or the left, when they advance some agenda of vulnerability or the caring for minorities, etc., even those kind intentions, even them, they have something misleading in them as well, which essentially leads them to disregard the influence of science, the scientific method, right? Which is quite funny as well, right?
Yeah.
So
And
when I realized that we are heading there, I didn't have at that time the tools to actually address those things. So if I could start, introducing to you the principles which actually led us to this conversation, which we found meaningful enough to engage to each other, right? While I didn't have those tools, I had intuitively followed the principle of clarity, at least. And second thing, I tried to make it practical. I wanted to speak through my actions instead of my words, because I can sound smart. I can, take you on a journey in so many directions. You can be quite smart and educated and educate me in so many different ways, right? But if we will just talk about those things and they won't lead anywhere, what is the value of our speech, right?
I think sorry for interrupting. I think the biggest obstacle in achieving this clarity is our human nature and trying to be either right or wrong. While even from the scientific point of view these days, if you are looking at quantum physics, even science is starting to abandon the classical way of thinking, where a system was either in a state or another. That I say, it could be either one or the other. It could be anything in between.
That's
And
why just having an idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis is so damn helpful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't require you to even believe in that. Even it doesn't require you to trust it as a method too.
But
Right?
I think that even when you are bringing a new approach, whether it's the antithesis or the synthesis to someone, if that person has carried on, let's say, for decades, believing in something, and I don't want to say no religion or belief or principle or something like that, and you are bringing a valid point of view that is quite the opposite or something in between, strictly from the human perspective, it's very difficult for that person to abandon a road on which that person has went on for years. And that was exactly what I was saying earlier. If you discover that you've went on a road for years, for a lot of time, and you discover it's wrong, you can just go back. But
You
people
know what? You have just addressed something really, really unique. I haven't been in that kind of setup where that thing would be addressed so tactically, I would say, right, if I would be picky with words. When you have mentioned the beliefs, right? This question was daunting on me. Is that a phrase? Daunting or haunting?
daunting is an option, yeah.
Yeah. So this question was daunting me for years since I was, engaging in different religious setups from my the background of my dad's, beliefs, and I've seen many different Christian communities there. Then my studies at at the Faculty of Catholic Theology, then the friends who would be, advancing in some esoteric ways as well. I've been exposed to many different religious influences, and the question of beliefs have always daunted me because when I was trying to be clear with that one, the most simplistic way I could address it through was trying to identify what is the difference between the thing which we call our belief and another funny thing which we call self-assurance.
Yeah.
I called and I asked every religious leader, every so-called spiritual person, everyone who would be promoting any sort of beliefs, I would be asking the same question. Tell me the difference. What is the difference between your beliefs and your self-assurance? And nobody, not even smartest guys at my uni, could answer that question.
Yeah. Well,
So I was stuck with that for quite a long time.
religions have this peculiarity where they come with a whole system of beliefs, actions, things that you should do. And just to make it clear, I'm not talking about a particular religion over here. So it could be, I don't know, Christianity,
Just
Buddhism,
a general
Kabbalah,
idea of
whatever.
belief.
Yeah, but they come with a whole system, not with just a one single principle, a whole system. And people that are highly religious, let's say, or that are more inclined towards religion, are adopting this whole system and they build their life around it. So when you come with something new, with something disruptive, you are basically blowing up their whole structure in there. And in order to survive, they can't let that happen because that would mean the whole structure on which they have relied, their life, everything they did up to a point would collapse. And they would have to rebuild.
Can I have a control question here?
Yeah.
Right, like a control. I think they say a bullet point. Would it be worth living a life which you wouldn't be able to celebrate?
No.
What if we would just generalize that the belief is at least something that could be of the highest level of our celebration?
Can you give me an example?
So let's say that people celebrate what they believe in.
Yeah.
So practically speaking, when you start questioning and how do you say that? God forbid, I think that's the phrase. And God forbid, if you would start denying someone's beliefs. Is that the phrase? Is that how you would say it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. If you would start denying someone's belief, basically you will start denying something that they celebrate to the highest degree in their life. And since you just gave me an answer that you would hardly be able to imagine how one could live a life without being able to celebrate it, here we go. At least in this on that abstract level, where the belief is something that we celebrate the most in our life, at least from that kind of perspective, it becomes understandable that if I will start questioning what you believe in, I will remove the joy from you, the joy of celebrating that. I will
Not
make you
quite.
joyless.
Not quite, because you would have to convince me and to make me give up on my belief in order to disrupt my celebration there. And
Fair
a more
point.
fundamental thing would be, how did I ended up adopting the belief?
Fair
Was
point.
it
What if I would say to you, that your belief means nothing, meaning that it doesn't lead nowhere, because if I'd be standing next to you holding a bullet next to your head, and I would tell you, well, celebrate what you believe in, and let's hope that it will save you from your faith. You know, if I would challenge you to such a harsh degree, there wouldn't be a question, would I be able to convince you or not? Because it would be a question of whether your belief can actually save you or not. It would be an existential threat, right? So when you manage to cause someone an existential threat by questioning their beliefs, not even in such a radical way, just by being smarter, let's say, right? That is enough for many people. When they meet someone smarter who can provide them better arguments or more of them, right? And then they got frustrated, then they got scared, then they get frustrated, then they get scared, and they start falling into the pathway of denial, of rejection, of, you know, building the narrative, us versus them, and blah, blah, blah.
I think that at that moment, when you are facing, as you said, an existential threat, or let's say purely a threat, if you start questioning the belief that you had, if you start doubting it, that's usually a belief that you simply adopted. But if you came to that conclusion as a free thinker, starting from a free point of view based on your experience and what everything around you has taught you by experience, and freely you have arrived to that belief, I don't think you will give up on it, because it's
Or,
part of you.
or we can add to this story the situation, analogous situation, where someone is willing to die for their belief. Just simply that, right? So then, but then that's literally the point where I'm landing my question. What is the difference between your belief and your self-assurance? Because you could as easily die for some things which you are assuring yourself with, right? And then how would you identify? Are you being that stupid, or are you actually celebrating something of a great importance in your life?
I would rather say that behind this reasoning, if we're taking this example of people that are ready to die for a certain belief they have, there is definitely a psychological influence there that lead them to this and that will justify their behavior in some way, and that which aligns to everything, to the whole system they have in their head, and which justify any further action.
And then we come back to the point of the context of the conclusions that you make, you know, and then you are the one who is constructing those conclusions. You are assuring yourself that they are firm, that they are real, and then we come to the point where the human beings have discovered science and the scientific method, and the one which you could test. At least that would be the safety mechanism to understand whether you imagining something unreal or you are actually tackling something that's inevitably will exist regardless of you trusting that or not, right? So
Mm-hmm.
all of those
Well,
features, at least they are abstract on that degree, on such a degree, which is mind-blowing to so many people, because most of them, they just want to live their life in a happy way. They want to be simple.
no, but I think every person is aiming for his or her own happiness. And if you would achieve an absolute truth in no matter which domain, that would allow you to dismiss all the others' opinions that don't align to that truth, which is absolute. On the other hand, what I'm seeking, rather, let's say, in my personal life through the experiences I have and by being open to what other people are saying and examining other cultures, other systems of thinking, and so on, is to discover what works for me and what um, I decided it's worth to become part of my truth, of my reality that works for me. Because, for example, uh, without this, let's say you are, I don't, I hate the fact that we're getting back to religion because it's a subject at hand, but it makes it easier to understand the point. But you could say instead of
Hate
religion, you
us
could say
as much as
physics.
you want.
No, but so for example, let's say that you have this way of thinking, this belief, maybe a religion, maybe a philosophy, or whatever it is, that for you works. And without rejecting it, I'm looking at your belief, I'm trying to apply it, I'm trying to learn from you. Okay, let me see if there is something for me in there. And this has been, for example, my approach to a lot of things. After I had my belief that were actually adopted for quite a while as I evolved through life, I started questioning things. Then I said, okay, let me look at what other people are saying because there might be some truth in there. And I'm going to you and I'm seeing what you are doing and what you are telling me and what your version is, and I'm trying to apply. And I'm trying to see if it works for me. And if it doesn't, I discard it. If something works from there, I can keep that. And I keep repeating that until I build my own image in there and my own version with things that work for me.
And that is literally something that Jordan Peterson would call the maps of meaning. The meaning which leads somewhere. So when you discard something, you discard the things which didn't lead you anywhere, which are meaningless, you collect something that means to you something, which leads somewhere, the maps of meaning. And this is something that Jordan Peterson explores. He literally called some lectures, a sequence of his lectures, maps of meaning, right? But again, what I find in that is the narrative, which has specific terms, which many people are confused by so deeply.
Yeah. Something it can be difficult to follow him in his speech, but I think certain things can be kept simple, and at the end of the day, the important part is for each person to be happy in his or her own path, and also to accept others and let them be happy in their own path.
At this point, from like making some resolution from all of those things that we have mentioned here, what is clear to you, considering your intentions, which you have started this conversation with, and considering that my battery will die after the last 14%.
And considering it's quite late
charge,
in my country, all this put together.
considering that as well. So considering that, making this bridge from the things which we have started with when we have engaged with each other on that social platform, and where we came right now, like what kind of meanings do you see in that? Should we explore those meanings further? Should we do something, or should we rather stop?
Are we talking in general or right now? Because you're running out of battery anyway.
I'm running out of battery anyway, but I'm talking practically about the things because you know the nuance of my project, which is quite practical, I would say, quite on a quite critical degree, and I think that maybe it is better to not address that now, because it's better to not start what you can't finish, and we don't have certainly the time for that.
I will give you a quick opinion here. I believe that by having these conversations and addressing some issues or facts from different facets, from different points of view, people get to see different angles and learn to accept that there are different vantage points. And one doesn't have to be wrong for the other to be right.
There is even the thing in logics which is called apeliacija į loginę klaidą. That's how it would sound in Lithuanian language. I don't know if I could translate that as an appeal to a logical error. I don't think that would be correct, but it's basically because logic has some rules, and especially the mathematical logic, this side of this discipline. And by all the rules of logic, sometimes you come to the right conclusions, coming to them from the wrong assumptions, right? Yeah. So somehow this appeal to a logical error, I don't know how to translate that. Somehow it speaks about that. So you know what I want to land on something really practical, and on at the very basic level, you know that I'm aiming towards clarity. You know that I have built everything to speak through my actions, not through words. and you know that at this stage, all of my everything that I've developed is packed into my Sunny Swindon project. And as you can see for this conversation, the findings which I had to find in order to be effective with a positive project which speaks through sunny visuals at the most, superficial level, right? That has a very, very long way down to some very basic principles of existential questions, right? So all of that conversation, I really hope that will show you the depth of the background of that shallow visual storytelling, which you can see, right? But there is a direction, and the direction is clarity. Direction is speaking through actions, not through words, right? You've seen me thinking, you've seen me raising questions. You have shared with me your perspectives, and you've seen me reacting to them. You can have a sense and feeling how well can I listen to you, how carefully do I respond. Hopefully you can identify that that I'm not playing around with those things, and they're real to me.
Yeah.
So they mean something to me, they lead me somewhere. But all of that introduction was more like a conceptual introduction to the job which I do right now, right? So would you be happy to have another conversation where we would literally dive into some practical elements and aspects of it?
Sure, we can do that. We just need to find the right time, because apparently we enjoyed this conversation. It took us close to 3 hours almost. Yeah, it was unexpected.
I wholeheartedly I thank you for your patience.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you give me your feedback? How
Well,
did you perceive all of this? Where did this conversation touch you? Touch your heart, or touch your beliefs in the best way of that.
well,
Let's
the first thing that caught my attention, which I enjoyed, was let's call it like this, the philosophical perspective from which you are coming, because I'm more aligned to facts, to psychology, to certain practical aspects, and it's really interesting to see every now and then a completely different point of view, but one that can be brought into the conversation with arguments. And a particular thing that got my attention was the bit about the system of beliefs and reassurance, which I think I might explore in the future. So I call dibs on that. I might use it in an article when I settle my ideas. But I appreciated that, and yeah, of course, it's always a pleasure to have an intelligent conversation. Thank you for that.
It was my pleasure as well.
Oh.
So let's maybe pause this recording now.
Yeah, let me here stop recording.